Hi, I'm Marina Patrice Vare. I'm a certified yoga therapist, a certified Daring to Rest yoga nidra facilitator, and today I'm going to chat with my friend Brooke West, who is also a yoga therapist. And I want to just give a little context for sort of how Brooke and I came to be in this conversation. So, back in October of 2021, I attended the Accessible Yoga Conference that was being held virtually. And one of the things that the founder of Accessible Yoga, Jivana Heyman, had encouraged us to do at the conference was to, meet some folks. And the homework was assignment was to like help uplift and to support each other. So I went into the conference like sort of thinking about how to be part of that, and started tracking people's like pronouns as I met them, basically because I am trans non-binary, and so I was looking for folks that it would be safe to be in conversation with, or safer to be in conversation with. Um, and so Brooke and I met on the very first day at the pre-conference session, and for just a few minutes. Only each of us got to share for maybe like 2 minutes in a group setting, but traded contact information, and then following the conference got in touch, and we had just a first like Zoom conversation with each other, and it went really deep really fast. And one of the things that we discovered that we have in common is that we both are living with a bipolar diagnosis. So I'm living with bipolar 2, Brooke has a bipolar 1 diagnosis. And I don't know, I think it's pretty wild that like just sort of at this conference, I got to meet another yoga therapist who's trans non-binary and living with a bipolar diagnosis. Maybe that's because for me, those some of those identities have felt really stigmatized. And so, to get to meet someone else and be like, yes, like, wow, we have these things in common. And also like yoga is helping us to navigate them. I don't know, was really cool for me. And then when we were together, Brooke told me this story about their experience of yoga therapists who really wanted to know more about what it was like to use yoga to serve folks with bipolar. And so I asked Brooke to retell this story for us again today. I hope that it serves you. Hey, Brooke.
Hi. Good morning,
Good morning.
wherever you are.
So you told me this story about an experience that you had at Sitar, and I want to ask you to share that like with a larger world. But I also, before we dive into that, feel like maybe we should like introduce ourselves to whoever's going to listen to this. So do you want to do a little like who you are?
Sure. I'm happy to be here and doing this, so thank you for even thinking about it. Um, my name is Brooke. I use they and she pronouns. I'm currently living on Squaskin land, Nisqually land in Olympia, Washington. And I'm a yoga therapist. I meet with clients and I teach a couple of classes here and there, workshops, and I um, specialize in restorative yoga, yoga nidra, and meditation, really for mental health and balance. And I do that because of my own lived experience and how much yoga has helped me. I want to give back, and it's just kind of like the natural. It's been the natural progression of my dharma, probably, you know. Um, and I fell into yoga therapy as a track, really at this Sitar conference, which is the Symposium on Yoga Therapy and Research that the International Association of Yoga Therapists puts on every year, every other year. I'm not sure, but in 2011, I was told that this symposium was going to be held just a couple of hours away from where I lived, in California at the time, and um, and I I went online to see what they would be offering as workshops, but for some reason, the way that the website was set up, you couldn't see the workshops until you registered.
Mm.
And so, where the registration was, I saw that there was a scholarship button. And so, I hit the scholarship button and I was able to see the workshops. And one of the workshops was yoga for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And I had become a yoga teacher in 2005 because I wanted to know why it was helping me, why yoga was helping me manage my mood. And of course, they didn't talk about that. We didn't know enough about the brain at the time, like we do now. But they did sit me down and they taught me how to meditate. And then they taught me how to teach meditation. So I wasn't supposed to get that scholarship. It was a loophole. I jumped over some hurdle that wasn't, it was meant for me. Anyway, I got to this conference. It was beautiful on the grounds of Asilomar in Monterey, right on the beach. It's just spectacular. And there were, I remember getting there and going into like the cafe or something and sitting down and kind of landing and looking out and on the grounds and seeing yoga therapists walk around. And I had this moment, like I have these sort of mystical moments from time to time. And it looked like above everybody's body, there was like a beam of light. People were walking around. There was so much light at this conference. And yet, um, there was also uh, humans being humans. And so I think it was the last day of the conference that I attended this workshop on yoga for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And the first presenter, I wish I could remember her name, but she did the research on yoga and schizophrenia back in 10 or 11. And she is associated with a hospital, a teaching hospital in, I want to say on the East Coast. If you told me her name, I would remember. Um, I want to say her first name is Elizabeth. Anyway, she gave a beautiful presentation. She shared about how meditation isn't necessarily appropriate for people with schizophrenia. That was enlightening. And um, then the woman who was presenting on yoga for bipolar disorder gets up there, introduces herself. She was a dance therapist, I think, a movement therapist who worked at an inpatient unit in New York City, I believe. And her very first slide says there is no research on yoga and bipolar disorder. And I thought, okay, she is on the schedule to teach this workshop. That's how she got, it almost felt like I felt a little bit duped. I felt duped. I felt baited. And then she proceeds to tell a story about a girl who came into the inpatient unit manic and proceeds to describe her psychosis a bit, and that this girl took off her clothes and took the sheets and made yoga clothes out of them. She was apparently a yoga teacher as well. And I remember the whole audience laughing about the maybe the absurdity that it sounded like to them, that this girl was putting yoga, creating a yoga outfit. I think to myself, like, what piece was this woman getting from her yoga practice that she wanted to carry it in with her to this inpatient unit in an expanded state of consciousness, whatever it is, we don't really know. So there was that piece, because I have been in an institution involuntarily. I wasn't teaching yoga, I wasn't even practicing yoga at the time, but I feel like empathically I can understand the hope and the security that this person was trying to gather for herself in a very um, unpredictable environment like a hospital when you're manic. The other piece to that, which was even more discomforting for me, um, was that the whole audience was laughing at the anecdote that the presenter was sharing about this girl doing something that seems absurd. And I was with the first time I told you this story, and I've told it like this before, and it's true that, when you're watching a movie and somebody goes into like a fun house, or they're in a situation where like everything is disorienting and they can't relate to anybody, and they're looking around and like people's faces get big and they get small and they're laughing and their mouths are open, and it's like you're in like a nightmare. I felt like I was in a nightmare because everybody was laughing at this story about this girl who was manic as this woman's presentation. This was this woman's presentation, who's a yoga therapist. And I was furious, and I thought I can do better. So I did speak to her afterwards, and said I didn't think that it was appropriate the way that she shared, both that she got up there as a presenter with no research to present, and also the way that she told the story about this person with experiencing mania. I can see now, I can flip it around now and see that, the fact that this yoga therapist shared the way that she did, it launched me. It launched a trajectory for me in my yoga therapy career, which I didn't even have at the time. I didn't think there had we had my school at Ananda, they had just developed a yoga therapy track like in 2010, like the year before or something. And at that conference, the director of the program approached me and asked me if I would like to do the yoga therapy track. And I said yes. And from there, I completed my training as a yoga therapist. Um, so my interest had always been, yes, why was yoga helping me with my mood as someone diagnosed with bipolar disorder who's experienced severe depression, suicidal ideation? My older sister committed suicide, with mental health issues in my family. My father's side really kind of loudly, and my mother's side more quietly. Um, and I also wanted to know about the mystical aspects of what we call psychosis. Why is across the board megalomania, or thinking that you're Jesus, or, you know, whatever that symptom is, or significator, is that the word? Like, this is showing that you have, like, if you check this box, you are probably bipolar and having some sort of psychotic event. But how why is it that everybody has this like experience of unity consciousness? And how does yoga create a framework potentially to allow that expression of unity consciousness to be measured in a way that's healthy, and actually along the lines of expected spiritual development? So if we're talking about like the Yoga Sutras, for example, Patanjali's eight-limbed path, we do these practices, we experience these, you know, sublime states, we go to samadhi, and the different states of samadhi, right? So there's savikalpa samadhi, which is like the one where you lose your ego and then you come back to the world. Is that possibly what mania or psychosis is? Where you lose your ego. I lost my ego. Came back and was like, how am I supposed to deal with the world now? Like, now that I've seen that I am a part of everything and this whole thing is a joke, this whole thing is Maya. This is a delete, like we're all playing these parts. Like, where did I, when did I, they gave me the script, like just before I landed, like what? And then this Nirvikalpa Samadhi, like how do we make a really good life for ourselves, especially for those of us who have been diagnosed with bipolar. And when I was diagnosed in 95, we weren't really talking about the brain like we have since Obama started that brain research project when he came into office. Um, there was a lot of shame around it. I was chemically lobotomized. I had to drop out of school. I um, was it took me longer to come out of the trauma of being involuntarily hospitalized and involuntarily medicated than it did to kind of understand like what it was that I had actually gone through in the psychosis. It wasn't the psychosis that was traumatic for me. It was how I was treated, and the subsequent like being told that I wasn't going to amount to whatever I would have before, and all of that. So eventually, I ended up doing a little research study, not for bipolar disorder specifically, but for the County of San Luis Obispo's behavioral health program, the drug and alcohol services for an intensive outpatient program that they were doing. I offered 13 weeks of yoga, and we um, we gathered evidence and we met all of our therapeutic objectives, and it was a wonderful thing, and everybody like was really surprised at how well yoga worked as an intervention to maintain people's mental health and reduce their anger, and keep them in medication compliance and all the things that they were looking to help to support people to do. And I was able to take that research and present it at Sitar in 2015. So I ended up doing what I thought I could do a little bit better, and presenting at that conference felt like a peak goal. But it wasn't on bipolar disorder ultimately. And it didn't really discuss the mystical aspects of what we think of in a scientific way as mental health issues. Nobody has ever asked me what was the meaning of that psychosis for you, you know? Um, and so I think that that's a missing piece in the way that we approach mental health right now. I think it's a piece that yoga therapists can address in a very kind of elegant way, because this is a part of the practice of yoga. Um, and I, I don't know. I think that we're moving through, I think that, I mean, however you want to look at it, back in like 2014, or there was a World Health Organization study that came out and said that bipolar disorder is the sixth leading cause of disability on the planet. So a lot of people are having these mood disorders that are probably associated with trauma, and the amount of trauma that we're all experiencing, especially post COVID and whatever's going on in Eastern Europe, and all the threats of our precarious financial system and all of that stuff. Um, there may be an opportunity here to really express the spirit with which we come onto this planet, and how to navigate what we're coming up against um, as humans today. Um, Yoga therapy can help with physical issues, mental health issues, emotional, behavioral, social, right? All of those things, and also the spiritual, and it can be really individualized for each person. Um, And so, as a survivor of a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, I'm able to help to support other people with not just bipolar disorder, but other mixed mood experiences, all kinds of things. If it can, that it can address physical health, it can also address our spiritual health. And because that's sort of a missing piece, I think, Western, in the Western medical model, um, and because there are breakthrough symptoms for people on medication, and because it's just like an epidemic of a diagnosis, whether it's bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, or I think there are a couple others now, 3 maybe, and 4. um, I'm really happy to be able to support people who are looking for really a holistic intervention to help stabilize not only mood, but how to live, you know integrating Ayurveda and mind control, right? That's what yoga is, mind control. So that's my story. That's kind of what kicked off my and it kicked off my career by kicking off my fury and the inequity and injustice of um being put into a hospital without anybody asking me, well, what's going on with you? Just you're acting a certain way. um Danger. um
And there's a thing that really strikes me, right, when you tell this story about, or when you're retelling the story of the woman, right, that everyone is laughing about, right? But for me, I'm thinking about, maybe you can speak to this for a minute, for folks that have never been inside like a closed ward, right? Like you have nothing, you can take nothing in, right?
mhm,
And so
yeah.
the resiliency of human spirit, right? Of
Ooh.
this woman taking the sheets, right? Like what was available to bring her in connection to,
Mm,
I'll call it like the avatar of herself as a yoga
mm,
practitioner,
mm,
right? To me, like that's a really
mhm,
powerful image.
mhm.
And I know we only have a couple minutes left here, but I'm curious if you want to speak to that or anything related to that.
um I'm still traumatized by the experience. And so, I wasn't there in the hospital when that girl was dressing herself. um I go right back to when I was in in solitary. Basically, I was put in solitary without anybody explaining what was happening to me for, I don't know, if it was probably about 24 hours. um I was a food tray was delivered. At some point there was an apple. I remembered that my mom had told me once to not eat waxed fruit because it kept the toxins in or something. And that apple was obviously waxed. And so I um, kind of peeled off the skin of that apple and ate the white inside of it and left, the core and the peel there. And I remember the mean nurse, coming back in and scowling at the way that I had eaten that fruit. And, you know, what you're saying about, for me, I don't know if it was so much resilience, but expressing what I had learned was important to me, what should be important to me. And isn't it interesting that back in 2011, when, we'd had this cultural phenomenon of yoga being very celebrated for about 10 years, right? I know I started practicing regularly in 2002. and watched Yoga Journal blow up, and it was um, esteemed. So that girl had done some yoga teacher training and had determined that it was acceptable to be a yogi, do yoga, dress yourself. It was a safe space for her, right? For me, a lot of my trauma leads back to my family of origin, and so connecting that apple and what my mom had taught me, and like, no, I'm going to be a good kid, and I'm going to do this all right, and I'm not going to make any waves, because I really wasn't trying to. I was just my trauma was just expressing itself in an unbridled way. um I don't know if that answers your question, but I go into a little bit of my trauma and my spin when you bring that up, because I think that we all have a different expression of our trauma and our, what yoga means to us, and what we think that it might how it might heal us, or the wholeness that it offers. It offers a promise, even with that first sutra, Atha Yoganushasana, and now we begin the practice of yoga. Like, it presupposes that we have come from something that is suffering, and now we are coming to yoga to relieve that suffering.
Yeah, for me, that's what the image, right, that this yoga therapist was describing is, right? It's this woman in this unfamiliar territory, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Reaching for that promise, right?
mhm,
Reaching for
mhm,
that steady practice,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
That
mhm,
offered some sort of, if I could put myself there, right? Like I would imagine that as offering a sanctuary and a stability in a place that was clearly not safe.
mhm. So the I just want to finish the story. A little tiny piece that I forgot to share is that the yoga teacher, I don't even know if she was a yoga therapist at the time, but she told this triumphant story about how finally, after a couple days, the medication kicked in, and this yoga teacher, the dance therapist who was working in the facility, got this girl into legs up the wall. And as the girl started to calm down, a single tear rolled out of the corner of her eye. I just remember the drama of like the visual of the whole thing, and how like this facilitator recognized the hope and you know the healing that could come with, a well placed yoga form, or a something that was um sympathetic to what was happening to for the person. um I guess I felt like there was a disconnect between the pain and the suffering and the confusion that the patient was experiencing, and the power that the teacher was taking credit for, um, in reaching this patient. I doubt I doubt that there was a connection that was made, upon discharge of that patient, that there was a connection. And so one of the reasons why I do what I do and teach people over a series of weeks or months or years in some cases, is to maintain a connection, so that I can remind people there are these tools. You can access them on your own. You're not beholden to me as your teacher. Yes, there is a therapeutic alliance and support when it comes to a peer to peer relationship. um, and how do we get this information out more and more, as opposed to me taking the credit for what it is that I do for people. I think that's a really important egoic distinction for yoga therapists in general. Want to stay really humble with the work that I do, and recognize that I'm a channel, as my lineage has taught me. for these practices. Yeah, bring in the mysticism. It's not me, it's something bigger.
I'm so grateful that Brooke took the time to share this story with us today and speak a little bit about their own experience as someone navigating bipolar. Um, on Wednesday, March 30th, is World Bipolar Day. And when I learned about this, I said, Brooke, hey, let's have a couple of conversations where we get to talk about what it's like to be folks with a diagnosis and what it looks like in the way that we navigate the world and what tools and resources we use to support ourselves. So this was the first of those conversations. We'll be releasing them on Wednesdays leading up to the 30th. And I don't know, I hope that they serve you. I want to let you know where you can find Brooke. Brooke is online at Brooke with an E, brookewestyoga.com. And if you're looking for me, I'm at sweetperfectionyogatherapy.com. And yeah, an invitation to just, if you are watching this and you have any questions or thoughts that you want us to address in our future offerings, to drop us, either one of us, a note and just let us know. All right, look forward to sharing more with you soon.